Hey, my name is Michael Blank. I am COO at Polygon, and super excited to be here at ETH Seoul, talking to you in Korea, where there's just a tremendous amount of energy and innovation. It's remarkable. The excitement is actually palpable here in Korea. The amount of innovation that's occurring is absolutely incredible. And I couldn't be more excited to help talk about what I'm going to talk about today, which is how do we bring Web3 to the masses? How do we bring Web3 to the masses? Now, Polygon is the world's leading Ethereum scaling solution. And it's our objective, it's our mission to help developers, to enable developers to build on Ethereum, to bring their experiences to the world, and through a commitment to security, to sustainability, and to constant innovation. And we've been working hard. We've been working really hard to enable both Web 2 and Web 3 developers alike, and working with some of the biggest platforms in the world. And let me share some of those highlights. You would have seen many of these announcements recently, but I'll just recap them. Reddit. We're powering Reddit's digital collectible service through Polygon technology. Or Meta, where Polygon technology is supporting Meta's foray into supporting NFTs on Instagram and on Facebook. Or Stripe, where we're powering payments through Twitter. Or Adobe, where Polygon technology is supporting the Behance platform, which is their creative platform for development. And I could go on and on and on. And I think one might assume, as a result of all of those announcements, and what people are doing here in this room, and what people are doing across the world in Web3, and some of our partners across blockchains across the world, that we have reached a level of mainstream adoption, right? We've reached a level of mainstream adoption. But maybe not. Maybe not so fast. The reality is, it takes about 10 years to move from that which we might describe as a trend to something that becomes a normal part of our everyday experience. 10 years. And I attribute that insight to an individual named Bob Johansen. Bob Johansen is a fellow at the IFTF, the Institute for the Future, which is a think tank based out of Palo Alto, California, in the States. And they help companies realize the future. They help them think about the future. And I said to Bob, it feels like when a transformative technology emerges today, that everyone across the world seems to get it all at the same time. Unlike what used to happen in the past where it took a long time. And he stopped me and he said, actually, that's not exactly right, Mike. It takes about 10 years. And there's a pattern. And the pattern of adoption looks sort of like what you see on the screen behind me. This is what we call the adoption curve, right? And on that adoption curve, we're right about there. Can you see that white dot? We're right about there on the adoption curve in the Web3 world. But I just said we're partnering with all these big companies, and there's so much happening and so much vibrancy in the space. And I think those who follow what's going on in the world of crypto would say, well, crypto has some level of mainstream adoption, doesn't it? And the answer is it does. It does, but we're still very early on in this adoption curve. And the reality is that transformative technologies, such as what we have with blockchain, undergo some level of market frenzy, right? There's some level of market frenzy, and that's not unique to the world of Web3. That happens across virtually all innovation in the technology space. And so if we look at some innovations that have occurred in technology and think about what's happened there, one might assume, and if somebody asked me a couple of years ago, how long would it take until everyone in this room and everyone in their houses and every industry had VR, had a VR in their house, I think I would have said it would have already happened. Because a couple of years ago, it seemed like everyone was talking about VR, and VR existed everywhere. It might also be surprising to know, maybe not for all of you, but people out there, that the revenue generated from streaming music services has only been surpassed by traditional forms of revenue in the music space in about 2018 or 2019. And again, I think if you would have asked me this, how long ago did streaming music surpass traditional music, like on discs or back in the day on cassettes? I think I would have said a long time ago. I'm surprised that it is only 2018 or 2019. And that's the thing with transformative technologies. It takes a while to gain mainstream adoption. Acknowledging that, building something new is hard. Building something transformative, whether it be a service, a product, some kind of tech, is difficult. It's fraught with uncertainty. There are unknowable risks. It's a hard thing to do. And so, what I'm putting forward today is that there are three critical considerations for developers, for innovators, and most importantly, for how we think about supporting end users, whether those be developers or whether those be actual consumers, human consumers. Three critical considerations in driving towards mass adoption of any innovation, but Web3 in particular. And those three considerations are the following. One, value. Most important. When you're trying to build something for a lot of people, you have to ensure that what you're building provides more value than the thing that existed before it. The second, complexity. Is the thing that you're building easy to use? Easy to adopt? Is the barrier to entry low? And third, stickiness. What I mean by stickiness is there a community, a robust community, a thriving ecosystem of developers, apps, and users who come back and utilize whatever the thing is on a repeated basis? Right? Do they come back and use it over and over and over? Not do they come back and use it only once? Those are the three factors. And actually the test for what determines whether something has reached mainstream adoption is whether it becomes a normal part of our everyday lives. Has it become a normal part of our everyday lives? Have we demystified it? Because new things are scary to people, they're complicated, they're difficult to use. How do we make it normal? That's the test. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of innovations that have occurred and apply that framework, and we'll see why some have made it to mainstream adoption and why some are still on the path. We'll start with the iPhone. The iPhone actually took a shorter period of time than 10 years, because 10 years is sort of like a general maxim, but let's apply the three principles. The first is value. I think we can all assume that the iPhone is better than any previous device that tried to purport to do what the iPhone did. I'd say it's one of the best devices ever invented. And it's certainly better than any product in its category, right? It provides tremendous value, better than others before. From a complexity standpoint, even a 2-year-old can swipe. My 2-year-old kid could play video games before she could walk and talk. And from a stickiness perspective, there's a robust community, there's a thriving community of developers, apps, and users who engage repeatedly around the experience that exists on the phone. And there is an underlying technology that enables the iPhone to be delivered and experienced by the masses. Not just the form factor, not just the chip, but let's call it 3G. So the iPhone has reached mass adoption. The internet. It's taken a long time. The internet, I think we'd all assume and agree, it's reached mass adoption. Why? Value. It's better than any information sharing system that existed prior. Certainly better than the homing pigeon, way better than the encyclopedia, right? It's just an amazing information sharing system. From a complexity standpoint, if you have a computer and a connection, whether it be through the air or through a cable, you can connect to the internet, right? Simple. And from a stickiness perspective, there's a thriving ecosystem of developers, websites, apps, and end users who connect and engage around those experiences that exist on the internet. Of course, there's a technology underlying it all that has enabled it to reach to the masses. That underlying technology, amongst a whole bunch of things, maybe we'll call it AWS. Back to the example of VR. I said it earlier that VR has not yet reached mass adoption. Let's again apply the three principles or the three considerations. One is value. I think we'd all agree that VR has not yet reached the requisite level of value because it's often better to do things in the real world than you prefer to do in the real world than you would on VR. The experience is better. Secondly, from a complexity standpoint, you have to wear it on your face. It's a janky experience, and it costs a lot, right? So it's not really accessible to a lot of people. And from a stickiness perspective, there is not that thriving community yet, although it's growing, of apps developers and users. And there's an underlying technology, VR, which is enabling the delivery of VR experiences to the masses. But because of value and because of complexity, it has not yet reached that requisite level of adoption where we will all have a VR headset in our houses. I'm going to give you a fourth example. You should only do threes, but I'll do a fourth. And the fourth is maybe a permutation on the first three. And the fourth is this. There's another device out there that is really expensive to purchase, and you also wear it on your face, but nobody's asking for a new version of it. Anybody want to hazard a guess what that new device is? There's probably a bunch of those. It's expensive, and you wear it on your face. Anybody? Glasses? It's a good example. Pretty accessible now, though, right? I mean, but a good example. It's not the one I picked, but okay, I'll give you the example that I chose. It's the Violin. Now, the Violin is an example of a device that you wear it on your face, and it's expensive, but nobody's asking for a new version of it. And why is that? And here's the variation on a theme on the definition of value. So what I said earlier was something that does something better than the thing before it is what defines value. In the case of a violin, it has intrinsic value. It, in and of itself, is value to an end user. It doesn't have to be better than something else. It does what it does. And as a developer, as a builder, we need to think about distinguishing between, are we building something that is better than the thing before it? Because if that's the case, then it has to be faster, it has to be less expensive, it has to be more accessible, it has to be easier to use. But if the thing itself has intrinsic value, like the violin, you don't need a better thing. And then to double click into that, when you're building something for people, you have to decide who your audience is. So I'm going to reiterate. Value, complexity, and stickiness. From a value perspective, the thing either has to be better than the thing before it, or it has to offer intrinsic value. It has to be easy to use. In other words, the barrier to entry has to be low. And then there has to be a thriving community of developers and users. And in the case of Web3, applications that they want to engage with. Applications that they want to engage with. And the reality is, we're on that curve. We're getting there. But there's a thing that we do in the world of, let's say, blockchain. And that is that we often talk about how the technology works versus what the technology does and why it's good for an end user. Again, we talk about how the technology works. We need to talk more about what the technology offers and why it's good for an end user. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's talk about a car. If somebody came to me and said, Mike, what is a car? And I said, here was my response. Imagine this. I say, well, the principle of an internal combustion engine is that if you inject some high-density fuel into a small chamber and you ignite that high-density fuel in the chamber, it expands as a gas. The expansion of that gas creates an event. That event causes motion. That's a car. Nobody would understand what I was saying. What if somebody asked you, what is Uber? And you said it's a cloud computing platform. Or if they said, what's Airbnb? And I said, it's an indexing directory. Nobody would know what that was. And that's the challenge of those of us who work in transformative technologies. We tend to describe how the technology works. And so what I often hear is, what are you building? And what I hear back is, oh, I'm building a EVM-compatible experience application. It's using zk EVM. It's custodial. There's NFTs. It's self-sovereignty. And all these words are used. And because we're creating something new, we've created a new nomenclature, right? We've created a new vernacular. And that's okay. We need a vernacular. We need a nomenclature to talk about what we do, or how we do it, I guess. But when you're talking to end users who want to adopt your experience and use it, talk about what the technology does and why it's of value to you, not how the technology works. Not how the technology works. Okay, so let's apply now this same set of considerations, these three considerations, to the world of Web3. To the world of Web3. And so I'll start with value. I can say that there is and we all see it, there is an incredible amount of innovation occurring in this space from developers globally. They're building unique applications that are changing the way in which we experience the internet. And it's a remarkable thing that's happening. And in some cases, these things provide intrinsic value, and in other cases, they're better than the things before it. But overall, tremendous amount of value being created. But we're using a lot of technical jargon when we talk about it, and therefore it makes it really inaccessible to end users. From a complexity standpoint, we're making tremendous strides in making applications that live on the blockchain, the world of Web3, easier to use, right? Easier to use, we're lowering the barrier to entry. We're starting to think more about how an actual human might use these experiences, not just the very deep core community. But I will say also that we are pretty far away still from what I think we would all describe as great user experiences. In the world of Web 2, the threshold for how long it takes before somebody leaves your web page upon loading is 2 seconds or less. So within 2 seconds, you keep them. After 2 seconds, they leave the page. There are experiences that people in our world have, right, where it could take minutes, if not hours, for a transaction to occur. Imagine if you went to Amazon.com and you tried to buy your favorite thing, whatever that thing is, and it took 6 hours to buy it on Amazon. You'd think Amazon was busted, and you wouldn't buy a thing again from Amazon. So we have a little bit of forgiveness, right, in our world today, because it's new, it's emerging. We're creating transformative technology. It's hard. But again, the premise of this discussion is how do we do what we're doing and demonstrating the tremendous innovation and these experiences that are really revolutionizing how the internet is experienced to more people. The user has to be put at the center. And from a stickiness perspective, there are more developers, there are more applications, there are more users entering in to the services built on blockchains, into the world of Web3 every single day. But that number is still relatively small. And the number is still relatively small because, why? Because the value isn't described effectively and it isn't always there. and the complexity is generally pretty high. That's sort of like VR, right? We're getting there. We're getting there. And the underlying technology that enables these experiences to be delivered to the masses hasn't scaled sufficiently so that millions of users can complete millions of transactions simultaneously without risk or fear or failure. We're not there yet, but we're getting there every single day, every single day. And that's why I'm really excited about what Polygon is doing. How is Polygon hastening or accelerating the adoption of Web3? I'll go back to the three considerations. From a value perspective, we are supporting developers, large and small, globally. We're helping them figure out how to find their value. And we're doing that through hackathons, like Polygon Connect. We're doing it through investment, where we're helping provide them with a longer runway so they can hone the value of their services. And a whole myriad of other ways in which we're supporting developers to help them find the value that is intrinsically being developed within their applications. From a complexity standpoint, we're offering support to developers through user experience design expertise, through game design expertise. We're helping developers position their products so they can communicate them effectively to the end user. So it's not technical jargon, but actual human language that they can understand and appreciate and adopt and act and get into and feel, right? It has to be emotional. And from a stickiness perspective, we're bringing together more developers, more users, and more applications every single day by helping developers big and small build on Polygon technology. And we have an aspiration to create more endpoints that help developers get their experiences out to the masses, to help improve discovery. And of course, Polygon, as an underlying technology, is innovating all the time. At the very beginning of this discussion, I said one of the commitments that we make at Polygon is constant innovation. We recently announced our ZK EVM. There I'm using some technical jargon. We're developing services. We're developing technology that helps bring blockchain to the masses by enabling millions of people to complete millions of transactions simultaneously, which will allow developers, large and small, get their experiences to the people that they want to get to around the world, which is super exciting. So Polygon is making great strides across all three of these principles to help hasten and bring forward the world of Web3. And so I want to leave you with maybe a question as a developer. And that question is, who is your community and how do they exchange value in ways that aren't just about money? Minus DeFi, because that's about money. But everything else. And when you think about what the best applications are in the world, the best companies building the best stuff, they focus on product market fit. They focus on product market fit. They focus on providing value to their end user first. They put their end user at the center. They build something that people care about. They talk about it in emotional ways. That makes them want to resonate and utilize the experience, the application, the service, the technology that you're building. That's what great companies do. And then they focus on generating revenue after. So again, as a builder, as an innovator, who are you building your thing for? And how are you focusing on how that provides value to an end user? First, great things attract users, most importantly. And I'd love to hear from you about how you're doing all of those things that I just described. Connect with us on Twitter. Link in with me on LinkedIn. You can find us anywhere on the internet. And I look forward to speaking with you again. Thanks a lot.